So what if I could give you 5 FM23 tips that could make you £1 million? I'd be some kind of genius, right? Okay, these FM23 tips are not that good. They're not going to make you £1 million, but what they can do is save you time and win you points later on in your Football Manager save. And best of all, you can set them all up on day one of your next Football Manager adventure. So let's start with tip number 1. And if you're beginning life at a reasonably sized club with some good facilities, you might have ambitions of bringing through your own youth players. Now, of course, one of the factors that influences the quality of youth player that you bring through is the attributes and personality of your head of youth development. And at most clubs, you might be inheriting one that might not be best suited to bringing through your young wonder kids, but maybe too expensive to sack at the start of a save. Well, fear not, because there may be a workaround we can use if we check out all of the staff that the club have. And if the club we're managing has a director of football, it may be the case that they might be a better alternative to bringing through our youth players. Now, later on in your save, you could easily be forgiven for forgetting to set this up. But if we click on our staff responsibilities and head to advice and reports, you can see that when we hover over the option that says provide youth development information, it gives us the option to edit the member of staff that's going to be responsible for bringing through our first youth intake. So rather than a head of youth development that we might be planning on replacing at the end of the season, we could ask our director of football to take over this responsibility, leaving our head of youth development to just train players we already have in our youth sides, and then we can hire a better candidate at the end of the season. For our second tip, we're going to go with one that I often forget to do on day one, and it comes back to bite me, most notably it nearly caught me out in a recent stream. So how many times have you had a player score 2 goals in a game and then you win a penalty? But have you remembered to untick that box that allows the player on a brace to step up and take your spot kick? Now, fortunately in my stream, I got away with it as the player scored. But next time we might not be so lucky. So in order to make sure that we don't get caught out when we're selecting our penalty takers on day one, make sure you come down to the bottom of your penalty taker selection screen and untick that box that allows a player who scored 2 goals to take the penalty that you win. And whilst we're setting up our tactic on day one, why don't we implement possibly my favourite FM23 tip when it's your first day in charge of a new club? And that's to do with setting up your opposition instructions, which of course you can do on a game-by-game basis. But I find it easier to do it on your first day in charge of a new club, where rather than set up instructions based on the players you're going to be facing in your next game, you can instead set up opposition instructions for every different position in the game that you might face during the course of the season. And then whatever opposition instructions you choose will automatically be applied whenever you face that position during the season ahead. Our fourth tip for day one in charge of a new club is something that used to drive me mad until somebody explained to me that you could do something about it. I used to get so frustrated when I would set up my pre-season friendlies that I wanted to play, only to find that the game kept arranging new friendlies on my behalf. Well, here's how you prevent that from happening, and again we need to head into our staff responsibilities, this time clicking on the match option. And all we have to do is make sure that we untick this box that says backroom staff will arrange friendly matches for the first team squad, and now you're in complete control over who you will be playing in pre-season. But before we get into our next tip, pause the video and let us know down in the comment section below, what is the thing that you always forget to do on day one in charge of a new club that comes back to haunt you later on? And so to our final tip, and one that I'm guilty of not using enough in my prior saves, but one that I'm a complete convert to as well. And this tip is to do with our training, and in particular, how hard our players will train. From the training tab, if we click on the rest option, you'll see that you can set instructions for what training players will do based on how fit they currently are. Now, it may well be that when your players are fully fit, you might want them training at a greater intensity. Well, what better time to set that up than at day one of a new club? And in pre-season, even if they're close to full fitness, you might decide that you want to up the training intensity. intensity. Or later on in the season when you're facing a tough run of games, you might decide to lower that intensity so that the training ground doesn't tire your players out too much. But by setting that up on day one, tweaking that training intensity might just give you the edge during the first part of the season. So there's 5 Football Manager 23 tips that are best implemented on day one in charge of a new club. And if you like FM23 hints and tips, well, why not check out this video next?